One.
Thrust, parry, step. Oh, he ain't pretty no more.
Welcome back to the channel, folks. Mafia The Old Country has finally arrived. And believe it or not, it's been my most anticipated game of the year. I'll admit, 2025's release schedule hasn't exactly been stacked for me. I've mostly been catching up on last year's backlog, and some of the better games released caught me by surprise, like Oblivion Remastered, or Expedition 33. Or they were announced a few months before release, like Donkey Kong Bonanza. But ever since this game was announced, I had some cautious optimism. After Mafia 3 crashed with critics and fans, Mafia Definitive Edition felt like Hangar 13 getting back on track. It was a solid remake. Better graphics, smoother gameplay, quality of life fixes, and even a tightened up story. You can hear all my thoughts about it and the original Mafia in the link down below. So naturally, I'd hope they'd take what worked there and apply it here to the Old Country. The lack of early gameplay or deep previews had me nervous, but once I've heard it'd be shorter, more linear, and focused on the narrative rather than an open world, my hype meter started climbing. Now that it's out, I can say Mafia The Old Country met my expectations. It's good. Really good. Fans of Mafia 2 and the Definitive Edition will find a lot to love, but it stops just short of greatness. By sticking so closely to a back-to-basics design, Hangar 13 may have played it a little too safe. Longtime fans will feel right at home, but newcomers might find it very dated. While I think its $50 price tag is fair for what it's offering, I can't deny that for some, it might be too much of an asking price for what you get in return. So let's talk about what The Old Country does right, where it stumbles, and why I still think the Mafia series is finally back on the right track. Now, unlike I normally do, I didn't buy this game for PC, and instead opted for the PS5 version. While the recommended specs for the game are definitely high, I have a beefy enough rig to run it without much issue. Honestly, I went with the PS5 version because I had some Best Buy rewards that were about to expire, so I'd figure I'd save a little more on the game's already fair $50 price tag. I'm aware that, like pretty much every other Unreal Engine 5 game that's released, the PC version of The Old Country does have some performance issues. Though, if the Steam rating is anything to go by, it looks like it avoided being a complete technical disaster. Your mileage may vary, of course. So now let's get into it. Mafia The Old Country takes the series to early 1900s Sicily, a setting that feels fresh and full of atmosphere. You play as Enzo, who begins the game as a Caruso, Sicilian for mine boy, working as an indentured servant in the sulfur mines. His father sold him off to cover his debts, and Enzo spends his youth in dangerous, backbreaking conditions, clinging to the dream of buying his freedom and starting a new life in America. That dream is put on hold after a mining accident forces him into a confrontation with the Sparado crime family, who control the mines. Fleeing for his life, Enzo finds himself in the territory of the rival Teresi family. Don Teresi offers him shelter and protection, setting Enzo on a path that will take him deeper into the world of organized crime. The story follows familiar mafia movie beats: the rise through the ranks, dangerous jobs for the family, violent conflicts with rivals, a forbidden romance, and the inevitable realization that the mob life is not what it appears to be. While the plot isn't groundbreaking, it's tightly written, filled with memorable characters, and brought to life by excellent voice performances from a cast with mostly authentic Italian accents. Johnny Santiago's quiet yet commanding take on Don Teresi is a particular standout. Enzo himself is an interesting lead. In terms of personality and character journey, he feels like a mix of Mafia's Tommy Angelo and Mafia 2's Vito Scaletta. A young man drawn into the Mafia for a better life, but naive about what being a mafioso truly means. What sets him apart from previous protagonists is how green he remains even as he climbs the ranks. Having essentially lived as a slave for most of his life, Enzo understands the human cost of the mob's power. He dislikes extorting the people under Teresi's protection, is willing to kill in self-defense, but hesitates when ordered to carry out an execution. He appreciates the security and comfort he now has, yet he never flaunts it or uses it to feel superior. This restraint makes him one of the most relatable and likable leads this series has had, carried by Riccardo Frescari's excellent performance. On top of that, the game's dedication to capturing the period and setting is impressive. Dialogue is laced with authentic Sicilian phrases. and the accents and dialects feel natural rather than exaggerated. Conversations between characters sound like they belong in the early 1900s, and switching to the Sicilian voice track with subtitles makes the experience even richer. It's clear Hangar 13 put real care into making this world feel lived in and historically grounded. One of the more compelling aspects of the story is the dynamic between Enzo, Cesare, and Luca, which feels like a spiritual callback to the trio in the original Mafia. Enzo is the naive newcomer like Tommy Angelo, Cesare is the cocky and reckless one like Paulie, and Luca is the stern, responsible older brother figure, like Sam. A comparison that ends up being fitting for reasons I can't spoil. The chemistry between the three characters is strong, making their interactions some of the most engaging in the game. While Mafia The Old Country works perfectly well as a standalone story, you'll actually get more out of it if you played the previous games. It's full of nods and callbacks, or call forwards in this case, to events and characters from across the series. One character in particular gets their backstory fleshed out here, serving as the connective tissue that ties all four games together. The story isn't flawless, and there are moments that don't land as strongly as they could. Also, I'm not the biggest fan of how the ending plays out, even though I do like the ending overall. But it's still a strong and engaging narrative that easily stands above Mafia 3 and the original Mafia in terms of quality. Whether it surpasses Mafia Definitive Edition or Mafia 2 is up for debate. The latter still holds the crown for best story in my opinion, but The Old Country makes a solid case for itself. I'm really dying to dig into this story, but I'll save that for a future video where I cover the game's narrative in my usual long-form format. For now, I can say without hesitation, the story is the strongest part of Mafia The Old Country. If you play it for one reason, let it be for the story, because the gameplay doesn't reach the same level.
The Don looks after him then? Don Torrisi takes care of everyone around here, Enzo. Watch and learn today.
Visually, Mafia The Old Country is stunning. Rural Sicily pops with color and detail, and it's easily one of the best looking games I've played this year. It avoids that flat, overly clean look a lot of Unreal Engine 5 games fall into, instead giving the world a warm, textured feel that makes it feel alive. From the narrow streets of San Celeste to the sunlit countryside, there's always something worth stopping to look at. It's not without performance hiccups. You'll notice some frame stutter here and there, along with the occasional pop-in while exploring. Thankfully, none of it was severe enough to take me out of the experience. The sound design does a lot of heavy lifting in bringing Sicily to life. In the mornings, you can hear bird songs drifting over the hills. At night, crickets fill the air. The wind moves through the trees, rivers and streams gurgle in the background, and every environment feels like it has its own natural soundscape. Not since Red Dead Redemption 2 have I played a game that put this much effort into environmental audio. The combination of beautiful visuals and rich sound design makes Sicily a place you want to stop and soak in. Maybe even wander off the beaten path just to see what's around the corner. Unfortunately, those opportunities are few and far between, and even when you do explore, there's not much to find. The game world may be gorgeous, but it's ultimately just a backdrop for the main story.
2 laps around San Celeste. Ai posti. Pronti. Via!
Depending on the mission, you'll have the option of getting around by car or on horseback. Horses here work more like they do in The Legend of Zelda than Red Dead Redemption. The riding controls are simple, there's no separate health or stamina bar, and you don't need to feed or groom them. You can purchase different horses, but aside from their appearance, the only difference is how many bursts of speed they can use. They're treated purely as a means of transportation rather than living, breathing animals, which is fine by me. Honestly, I was never a huge fan of the hyper-realistic horse mechanics in Red Dead 2, so this stripped-down design works just fine. Driving, as in previous Mafia games, gives you the choice between automatic and simulated controls. Automatic is more arcade-like with slower acceleration but automatic gear shifting. Simulated is the opposite with faster acceleration but requiring you to shift gears manually. Whichever you choose, most cars handle fairly well at normal speeds but start to swerve and struggle with sharp turns at higher speeds. A few of the faster cars are prone to flipping if you take a corner too aggressively too. Overall, driving is solid and remains my preferred way to get around Sicily, even if the rural roads can be a little tricky to navigate. Unfortunately, outside of free play mode, you're rarely given the chance to just drive for the sake of it. Most of the time, it's simply getting you from point A to point B during a mission, and the game even offers a skip drive option to jump straight into your destination. Normally, I wouldn't complain about skipping travel time, but here it feels like yet another sign that there's not much to do in this semi-open world beyond the main objectives.
Seems that my friend is going to take it from here.
If that's how you want it.
One of the more surprising changes in Mafia The Old Country is that there's no traditional melee combat. You can't punch someone in the face, kick them when they're down, or break a bat over their head. While the melee systems in previous games were never a strong point, their complete absence here still feels strange. The closest the game gets is its knife fights, which serve as one-on-one boss encounters throughout the story. These duels control and present themselves similarly to brawls in Mafia 2. You trade swipes with your opponent, slashing or thrusting with your knife while parrying or dodging incoming attacks. Early on, they can be pretty engaging, especially since Enzo can't take many hits before going down. The problem is they get repetitive fast. Once you've mastered the timing for parries and dodges, most fights become trivially easy. Some enemies have slight variations in their attack rhythm, and a few will mix things up by tossing dirt in your eyes, but it's not enough to keep the system fresh. Knife fighting feels like the skeleton of a better mechanic that needed more depth. A stamina meter that limits attack spam, or a stance meter where landing clean hits opens an opponent up for heavier damage, could have made these encounters far more interesting. As it stands, I like the knife fighting for what it is, but it's not particularly challenging and never quite reaches its full potential.
When they stole from old man Fiquera, they put their hands in the Don's pocket. We can't have that.
While true melee combat is gone, shooting is still here. It's your standard third-person cover shooter setup. You get a small variety of period-appropriate weapons, pistols, shotguns, and rifles, and you can only carry 2 at a time. Money from looting enemies, safes, or cash boxes can be used to buy new guns, and you can also pick up whatever your enemy drops. The weapons all feel punchy enough and get the job done, but there's not much to say beyond that. Enemy variety is non-existent, so you never really feel need to adjust your loadout. You can stick with whatever feels best and coast through the entire game. You also get grenades as your throwable, which feel a little overpowered, thanks to a blast radius that's bigger than you'd expect, and enemy AI so brain dead they'll just sit there after calling out that they've spotted a grenade, and then get blown to bits. Tactics aren't much better. Maybe it's the smaller, more linear level design, but enemies mostly take potshots from cover and slowly walk toward you. They never flank, their grenades are wildly inaccurate, and they loudly announce when they're reloading, giving you the perfect window to pop up and shoot or just rush them. On controller, aiming can feel off thanks to overly aggressive auto-aim correction, so my advice is to just turn off auto-aim entirely. The gunplay is as serviceable as it gets. It's not terrible, inaccurate, or overwhelming, but it's also not very engaging or challenging. This is where The Old Country feels like a definite downgrade compared to Mafia 3 and Mafia Definitive Edition. Mafia 3's gunplay was more visceral and brutal, with larger encounters that felt more dangerous thanks to enemy numbers and open level design. Definitive Edition, while easier, at least gave you accessibility options to tweak difficulty to your liking. Here, difficulty modes just buff enemy health and damage. Outside of a few creative environmental kills, most shootouts blur together. If there's one part of this game that feels truly dated, it's the gunplay. The stealth gameplay fares a little better than the gunplay. Outside of a few exceptions, you can approach most missions quietly if you want. You can crouch to muffle your footsteps, use a hearing mode / detective vision to track enemy movement, and toss a coin or bottle to create a distraction. Sneak up behind someone and you can either choke them out or go for a stealth kill if you've got your knife equipped. Afterward, you can pick up the body and stash it somewhere out of sight. It's all serviceable, and feels a bit like Hitman Blood Money's stealth system. There are only a few mandatory stealth missions, and the game's pretty forgiving if you get spotted. Most of the time you'll have a chance to hide rather than getting hit with an instant fail. The downside is that, like the gunplay, the stealth never evolves. There are no new hazards introduced like guard dogs, alarms, or patrolling enemies that change their patterns. After a while, I realized hiding bodies was almost pointless. Since guards are spaced so far apart, the only time they notice a dead body is if you took a guy right out in front of them. Stealth does help break up the pacing, and there's a stealth-based boss fight late in the game that I actually kinda liked, but otherwise, it's about on par with other modern AAA games that dabble in stealth, without being full stealth experiences like the recent Hitman titles. There are a few smaller gameplay elements I didn't touch on earlier. There's no leveling system or skill tree, but you can find or buy charms and beads that give Enzo various buffs when equipped. These range from carrying more bandages to improved accuracy to automatically looting an enemy after a stealth kill. There are also collectibles like reports, newspaper articles, and artifacts you can sell for cash. Some mechanics though feel pointless. The most obvious is knife durability. Every stealth kill or lockpick uses up a bit of your knife's uses before it needs to be repaired with a whetstone. If it had been fleshed out, it could have added a layer of decision making between going for easy kills or saving durability for loot. But because whetstones are so common, it's basically a non-issue, and just feels like busy work. When it comes down to it, Mafia The Old Country doesn't reinvent the wheel. The gameplay works fine, even if it feels dated in places. Sicily isn't a true open world filled with things to do, but just taking in the sights is its own reward. And honestly, the scaled back nature, the 10 to 12 hour runtime, and the lack of typical AAA bloat is exactly what I've been craving in a game for a long time. It's also a great step in the right direction for the series, letting Mafia carve out its own niche instead of chasing trends. Reviews so far are mostly positive, averaging in the 7 to 8 out of 10 range, right where I'd rate it 2. It's not going to win Game of the Year, not with Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, and Donkey Kong Bonanza as the heavy hitters this year. For the record, I'm hoping DK wins, if only to watch Expedition 33 fans melt down online. But I can absolutely see The Old Country getting a nomination for Best Presentation, or even taking home Best Narrative. Having finished the game in just a couple days, I'm already craving more. Maybe if it sells well, we'll get some DLC. At the very least, I hope it performs well enough to keep the series alive. Its $50 price tag, short runtime, and narrative focus might be a hard sell for some, but I think it's a fair price for the average player. At the end of the day, it's up to the individual to determine if the experience matches the price tag. Would I be recommending this game if it was $80 or $70? Hell no. I'd honestly be more negative about it in that case. It probably would have been an easier sell if it launched on Game Pass, but I'm optimistic The Old Country will do fine. Hopefully, one day we'll get a Mafia game set in the 1980s that takes us back to Empire Bay or somewhere completely new. Another entry with excellent writing, a strong story and cast, but with the gameplay that finally matches its narrative quality. At the very least, this won't be the last time I revisit the series. I'm already planning a deeper dive into Mafia The Old Country's story, and maybe sooner than you think. And that's the video. Thanks for watching, folks, and special thanks to my channel members and patrons, including Alfred Correa, Augie Doggy, Bailey Morrison, Brad Taylor, Eric Lee, Gawkdroid the Critic, Kerr Guardians, Skillfuse, SR Powa, Thunder Muffin, and Reckless Nerd. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so for as low as $3 a month, which will give you early access to ad-free videos, and occasionally uncut videos when I'm forced to censor things for YouTube. Higher tiers will land your name in the credits, or a verbal shoutout. Keeping the outros short for today, so leave a like if you enjoyed the video, comment down below with your thoughts, and subscribe if you're new. I'm Fuzzy Slippers, and I'll see you later. Peace.